San Diego State currently 7.5 point favorite, or UConn is a 7.5 point favorite in the betting market. Total is up a little bit as well, I believe, up to 132.5, and I think it opened somewhere around 131, 131.5. So we're seeing a little bit of steam, despite this game obviously representing the second in 3 days for both of these teams, and both teams have a ton of depth when it comes to not only minutes continuity going back to last season. To an extent, I know UConn lost 4 of their key players, including a ball-dominant point guard in RJ Cole, and that's obviously what I want to get into right now. But San Diego State, I mean, you go back to last year's team, besides Darian Trammell, maybe I'm missing one other name, but this is Micah Parrish, who hit some big shots down the stretch, mind you, against FAU. A couple other transfers. I believe Ladie was added to this team this year. So, but this Aztecs team is loaded with depth, and so is UConn. So maybe the minutes and the workload that both of these teams had to endure on Saturday night won't come into play in the total. We'll go over. I don't have much of a take on the over or under, to be honest. But turnover-wise, because that's where I want to hit on here.
It's a big deal.
Right, it is a huge deal. UConn, something I've hit on every single podcast and hasn't come to fruition yet. So hopefully it does in this title game. Well, I say that, yet I have UConn futures, so I'm going to be sitting pretty.
Look, that's just because you made a good choice. That doesn't mean you have to love them in every game going forward, you know?
Right, exactly. I appreciate that. So UConn is ranking currently, per KenPom, number 236 in turnover percentage, 15 turnovers against the Miami Hurricanes. And those live ball turnovers, mind you, helped Miami get back into the game. And I wrote about this in my game preview, which you can find on thelines.com. That's really, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Justin, that's the first time all tournament we saw UConn really feel game pressure in the second half of this tournament.
For sure. I mean,
Miami cut it to around 8. So if this San Diego State defense can do or have a similar impact with their ball pressure, and again, they, I believe, rank top 110 in opponents' takeaway percentage across college basketball, across Division I. You think about Darian Trammell, their ball hawks. Lamont Butler is one of the best on or out ball defenders. I'm curious to see how Dutcher plays it in terms of who's going to shadow Jordan Hawkins, because Lamont Butler, if you look at his stature, now he's a very physical guard. These San Diego State guards are true men, but Butler 6'2", 195. Hawkins, number 1, has a high release point shot release to begin with. And you may see, I mean, Bradley could very well shadow, but I don't know if he wants to expend that much energy on a guy that finally came through for him in the semifinal against FAU. But Parrish, I think, is a decent shot to shadow him off the bench. We know how much Dutch loves Parrish, especially down the stretch in games. It doesn't matter for him who starts. Truly, that's the pure example of it doesn't matter who starts. It matters who finishes for this Aztecs team because of how deep they are. So, but if San Diego State's ball pressure could generate some of those live ball turnovers like we saw Miami produce infrequently, even though the 15 turnovers sticks out, they weren't able to do so at key points because UConn was able to build that significant double-digit cushion like we've seen all tournament. They got it done in the early portion of the game, even though Miami, I think, cut it to maybe a one possession, and then UConn built it back up until the half, and then Alex Caravan does what Alex Caravan does, hits halftime buzzer beaters to give UConn a 3-possession lead or bigger into the locker room. I know we mentioned it with San Diego State's ball screen defense and their struggles against FAU, which could definitely come into play against UConn. But the Aztecs' ability to get back in transition, I believe a top 50 shot quality transition defense is a big factor. But if they could slow this thing down to a degree against a UConn team that more so wants to play up tempo and get those perimeter looks and also get Sanogo rim running in transition, then the Aztecs, if that tempo, if those turnovers come into play more so early on in the early portion of the second half, and they're able to hold off that monster UConn run. Evan Minaya does a great job of this when it comes to kill rate. UConn is one of the best kill rate teams in terms of manufacturing those 10-plus point scoring runs. So if they're able to hold off those kind of runs for the Huskies, then they should be in good shape to hang around in this game.
I mean, I fully agree. And I think San Diego State might have the defense that's perfectly adjusted to like stopping those runs, making sure that when maybe your offense isn't earning those points well enough that they don't let the opposing team get too far ahead of them, right? That was kind of Miami's problem, is that when they were missing some of those shots that maybe they should have hit, their defense couldn't really
Poplar
compensate.
was pretty rough shoot efficiency-wise.
Yeah, I mean, look, and I have it right here. That big Caravan rebound with like 7 minutes left in the half, right? That was the final time in that game where the win percentage was at 80% or less for UConn. It never returned below that line really early, right, to get into that type of thing. It was 23-19 in favor of UConn at that time. Shot quality was expecting 27-19 in favor of Miami. So we had already essentially seen that Miami was taking all of these shots, getting more possessions, and essentially unable to hit them, and then allowing UConn to come in and score more than expected because the defense wasn't holding. So the hope here, and I think maybe not the hope's the wrong word, but like the expectation here is that the San Diego defense has a better opportunity and a better profile to stop that type of scoring from UConn, to slow them down, to force them into those offensive turnovers, which honestly, their offensive turnover rate is pretty bad. Like they do turn it over, outside of the top, like their ball
when they're
stuck.
The key there is because as good Andre Jackson, he has been more so the elite Andre Jackson, or I would say very much so the elite Andre Jackson, as opposed to the turnover-prone Jackson like we saw when defenses were sagging off of him. But when teams can keep Jackson and this UConn offense more so in the half court, that's when you get those Andre Jackson, Tristan Newton, and Diarra, who did play some minutes, more so than he has throughout the tournament, I would say. I would need to double-check. But those are the three guys. And Sanogo when he gets doubled in the post, although it's going to be interesting to see how Dutcher plays it. I could see him going single coverage because you don't want to leave these UConn shooters, especially with the way San Diego State plays drop coverage within their semblance of a pack line defense. That's the reason why the Aztecs ball screen defense grades poorly on shot quality and synergy. So
for sure,
all those factors come into play if San Diego State can keep this more so in the half court.
I agree. It's going to be really interesting to see how it turns out, honestly.